Burnout Dominator for the PSP, released in 2007 by Criterion Games and EA, is a unique entry in the Burnout series. It stands out as it wasn't developed by Criterion Games, the main developers of other Burnout titles, but by EA's UK studio. Designed with handheld play in mind, Burnout Dominator focused on high-speed racing and intense car crash action, offering fans of the series a slightly different gameplay experience. True to the Burnout formula, Burnout Dominator emphasizes driving aggressively to fill up the Burnout meter. This entry marks the return of the popular Burnout Chains, which let players continuously boost if they could drive dangerously without crashing. Unlike some of its predecessors, Dominator doesn't include the crash mode for performing stylized pile-ups, focusing instead on pure racing and road rage events. One of the standout features in Burnout Dominator is this Maniac mode, where players score points by performing daring moves like drifting, near misses, and chaining burnouts. This mode rewards riskier driving styles, adding an adrenaline-pumping dimension to the gameplay. The PSP version includes ad hoc multiplayer, allowing players to compete in local races. This was a popular feature, especially considering the portability of the PSP, making it easy to play with friends on the go. For a handheld title, Burnout Dominator does an impressive job capturing the speed and action-packed feel of console Burnout games. The graphics are sharp, and it maintains smooth frame rates, a testament to the PSP's capabilities. The game was built on a modified version of the engine used in Burnout Revenge, allowing it to retain the core physics, graphics, and intense crash mechanics familiar to fans. This engine was optimized for the PSP's hardware, enabling EA UK to achieve smooth, high-speed gameplay with impressive visuals for the portable system. Key adjustments were made to the engine to fit the PSP's specifications, which included downscaling textures, adjusting lighting effects, and optimizing particle effects for crashes. These optimizations allowed the game to maintain fluid frame rates, even with complex on-screen action. Audio compression techniques were also used to keep the soundtrack and sound effects clear without taking up excessive memory, given the PSP's storage limitations. One significant change was the removal of the popular crash mode, which was excluded to streamline the gameplay and possibly to work within the hardware limitations. EA UK instead focused on modes that would deliver the fast-paced, risk-driven gameplay core to Burnout. New features like Maniac mode and the Burnout Chain mechanic were introduced to encourage dangerous driving without compromising performance. The Burnout Chain, for instance, was a mechanic that rewarded players for stringing together consecutive boosts, enhancing the sense of speed without overwhelming the PSP's processing power. The PSP version was optimized to handle the game's high-speed visuals, detailed car models, and crash physics. EA UK reduced the complexity of the car models and simplified certain textures to fit within the PSP's capabilities. Clever use of visual tricks, such as motion blur, added a sense of speed and masked some of the hardware's limitations. Dynamic lighting was minimized compared to console versions, with simplified shading effects, making it feasible for the PSP without compromising too much on the graphical experience. Since Burnout Dominator was built on a modified version of the Burnout Revenge engine, EA UK had to make numerous optimizations for it to run effectively on the PSP's more limited hardware. Rendering and frame rate. The PSP ran at a resolution of 480 by 272, with a maximum of 333 MHz of processing power. To maintain fluid gameplay, the developers capped the frame rate at 30 FPS, which was ideal for the hardware while still giving a smooth experience. Texture and model optimization. EA UK reduced texture quality and polygon counts on car models and environments. For instance, car models had fewer polygons compared to the PS2 version, and textures were simplified. LOD, level of detail, adjustments. To keep performance consistent, they used level of detail, LOD, scaling, which dynamically reduced detail on distant objects or less visible parts of the scene. As cars moved further away, models and textures switched to lower resolutions to reduce strain on the PSP's GPU. The PSP had only 32 MB of RAM and 4 MB of VRAM, requiring creative memory management. Dynamic memory allocation was used heavily, allowing the game to allocate memory only when needed for specific assets like high-detailed textures or audio files. This kept memory usage low and allowed for fast asset swapping. Streaming assets. EA UK implemented a system for streaming assets dynamically, particularly for track textures, sound effects, and background music. Only essential assets were loaded at the start of each race, and non-critical assets were swapped in and out as needed, keeping memory demands manageable. Pre-calculated lighting. To avoid the PSP's heavy processing burden with real-time lighting, most lighting was baked into the textures, meaning shadows and highlights were pre-rendered. This allowed the game to present a well-lit environment without needing intensive calculations during gameplay. Simplified reflections. Reflections on car surfaces were another area of compromise. Instead of real-time reflections, EA UK used a technique called cube mapping, where static reflections are mapped onto the cars, simulating reflective surfaces without real-time computation. Limited particle effects. Environmental effects, like dust, smoke trails, and weather, were dialed back. The particle systems used fewer particles with simpler physics to reduce strain, especially during high-speed collisions when multiple effects would trigger simultaneously. Ad hoc networking. The ad hoc multiplayer feature was designed to minimize memory usage. By restricting multiplayer to local ad hoc play, rather than online, developers didn't need to build an entire networking protocol stack, which saved significant processing power and memory. Data streaming between devices. Data was transmitted efficiently between PSP devices during multiplayer races, with only essential data like player position, speed, and boost status being shared. This allowed the game to run smoothly without overloading the PSP's networking capabilities. 1. Gameplay and mechanics. Positives. Many reviewers highlighted the classic Burnout mechanics, especially the aggressive, high-speed racing and takedowns, as core strengths of Burnout Dominator. IGN, for example, praised the game's back-to-basics approach, emphasizing the return of the Burnout Chains mechanic and the adrenaline rush of maintaining a continuous boost. Games Radar also commended the intense, white-knuckle gameplay that the series was known for. Criticisms. Reviewers noted the lack of Crash Mode, a fan-favorite mode that allowed players to create massive pile-ups and earn points based on damage caused. This omission was felt strongly by fans and critics alike, as it removed one of the series' most beloved gameplay features. GameSpot's review stated that the exclusion of Crash Mode made Burnout Dominator feel incomplete, especially for those who considered it a defining aspect of Burnout. 2. Graphics and presentation. Positives. Critics generally praised Burnout Dominator's visuals, especially on the PSP. The game's graphics were considered impressive for a handheld title, with smooth frame rates, detailed car models, and exciting crash visuals. Publications like Eurogamer mentioned the clean and sharp graphics, which captured the fast-paced, arcade feel of Burnout even on the PSP's limited hardware. Criticisms. The PS2 version received more mixed reviews regarding graphics, as it didn't stand out as much on a home console compared to earlier Burnout titles. Some reviewers felt that the graphics didn't push the PS2's capabilities as much as previous games in the series. 3. Content and replay value. Positives. Reviewers appreciated the amount of content packed into the game, especially on the PSP. Burnout Dominator features numerous tracks across various global locations, and the Maniac mode, which rewards players for performing daring moves, added replayability and challenge. Game Informer praised the robust selection of tracks and modes, which kept players engaged with different challenges. Criticisms. The lack of an online multiplayer mode was a disappointment to some players, especially given that local ad hoc play was limited to the PSP. IGN noted that while the ad hoc multiplayer on PSP was fun with friends, the absence of online play limited its broader appeal and longevity. 4. Controls and handling. Positives. The handling and controls of Burnout Dominator were widely praised. Critics appreciated the tight, responsive controls that made it easy to perform risky moves and chain burnouts. PSP fanboy, now Engadget, mentioned that the controls are responsive and intuitive, making it easy for players to pull off dangerous stunts and maintain momentum. Criticisms: some reviewers felt that while the controls were good, the game's AI could sometimes be overly aggressive, creating frustration in certain races. A few reviewers noted that while the aggressive AI made the game more challenging, it could also lead to unfair crashes and difficulty spikes. 5. Audio and soundtrack. Positives: the soundtrack received praise for its selection of high-energy, rock, and punk tracks, which complemented the intense racing action. It featured music from artists like Alice in Chains and Sugar Cult, which added to the game's high-octane atmosphere. Sound effects like engine roars, crashes, and tire screeches were also well executed, enhancing the gameplay immersion. Criticisms: on the PSP, some reviewers noted that audio compression was noticeable, which detracted slightly from the quality of the soundtrack. A few reviewers also mentioned that while the soundtrack was good, it was smaller than previous Burnout games, likely due to memory limitations. 6. Overall reception and scores. Most reviews gave Burnout Dominator scores in the range of 7 to 8 out of 10, with major gaming sites generally recommending the game as a worthwhile addition to the Burnout series, especially for handheld gamers. Metacritic scores. On Metacritic, Burnout Dominator has a score of 79, 100 for the PSP version and 75, 100 for the PS2 version. These scores reflect the general positive sentiment from critics, but also indicate that it didn't quite reach the heights of previous entries in the series. Fan reception: fans were divided. While many appreciated the classic Burnout experience, others missed crash mode and felt that it lacked the innovation found in earlier games. The hype for Burnout Paradise, which was around the corner, may have also influenced perceptions, as many players were looking forward to the next major installment. Burnout Dominator stands out as a unique entry in the Burnout franchise, especially for fans of handheld gaming on the PSP. Developed by EA UK as a spin-off while Criterion worked on Burnout Paradise, Dominator took the series back to basics with high-speed racing, intense takedowns, and a focus on chaining boosts through dangerous driving. With visuals and audio tailored to the PSP's hardware, EA UK managed to keep the heart-pounding arcade action of Burnout alive on a portable platform, while the PS2 version offered a similar experience on home consoles. Despite solid gameplay, fans and critics noted the absence of crash mode and online multiplayer, which limited its appeal compared to previous entries. Critics praised the game's tight controls, responsive handling, and adrenaline-fueled races. The game's graphics were especially impressive for the PSP, though the PS2 version didn't quite capture the same wow factor as its predecessors. Burnout Dominator received positive reviews, averaging scores in the range of 7 to 8 out of 10, with the consensus being that while it wasn't revolutionary, it delivered a fun and satisfying Burnout experience, especially for fans who wanted that thrill on the go. And that wraps up our deep dive into Burnout Dominator for the PSP. It may not have reached the heights of the mainline games, but for those looking for high-speed, edge-of-your-seat action in a portable format, it definitely delivered. Have you played Burnout Dominator, or do you have a favorite entry in the Burnout series? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this retrospective, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future deep dives into the games we all know and love. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep the speed high and the crashes spectacular.